the system is less than 24 months old, I'll have to change that. It's an IDR, and if it's older than 24 months, it'll get you dragged up to the baseline, and we'd hope you'd move up more than 24 months old plus the IDR. It doesn't matter what the system is, it could be 10 years old, we will still diagnose it at exactly that level. Unless we've got really good reason to believe, yeah, we know we fixed that already, so we're not even going to look at it. We know we fixed it. As I said before, all fixes are put back to the tip of the source code tree, so therefore the more a system is maintained proactively, the less there is to change, less change to apply in a reactive situation. And this policy is designed to try to keep people reasonably current without breaking, causing undue stress, undue problems for customers who are trying to keep up to date. So I think 24 months is a reasonable window there. So graphically, if you're today, October 2012, you can get an IDR even if you're still running the original Solaris 11 release. And even next year, you can still get an IDR for the original release here. It's only when we get to December 2013 that if you wanted an IDR providing relief, it would push the baseline up to the 24-month level. We pull that up there.
Okay, so I mean, you're saying now, so to say, you with that, you said, I call you up and say, I have a system 3 years old, you'll say, you have to get up to this level first of all before we consider looking at
no, we will diagnose, we'll look at the bug at any level. Yeah. At any level, unless we're confident we've already fixed it.
Straight away, no, that's it,
yeah. Yeah, if we can see that bug, yeah, we know, we've seen that is exactly this bug that we fixed a year ago. But if it's a new bug, we will diagnose it at any level, even if it's 3 years old. It's just when we provide the fix, we'll drag that system up to a 2-year-old level. Okay. IDRs are designed for for specific customer issues, for the specific customer circumstances. They're not designed to be generic fixes for everybody. So what's a fix for one user might be toxic for another user, especially in some weird applications or with third-party stuff. And so therefore, it's only the customer for whom it's relevant that gets the IDR, and we're quite strict on who gets them. A nice feature of IPS, thanks to Pete, is that IDRs now auto-supersede. So if you used IDRs in Solaris 10, they're a pain in the neck to administer, because you're trying to apply the recommended cluster and it says that package is locked, and then you have to manually remove the IDR before you can move up. In IPS, it now auto-recognizes when the bug fixes in an IDR are now fixed in an SRU. And it'll just auto-update. It says, I know this SRU fixes all of the bugs in those IDRs, so therefore I know it's safe to overwrite it. And so you don't have to do any of that manual intervention. And that's thanks to Pete. And that's really the end there. So, any questions?
Presumably you have the right to roll back any individual packages after unlocking. So for example, if you have, let's say, authentication with Active Directory and you updated Samba broke the system, you can roll that back.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. First of all, because we've got ZFS root and we've got BEADM, the alternative boot environments. So if there's IPS will typically, if you're doing a major update, it will create a new boot environment. So therefore you've got the old boot environment available. So if you don't like what you see after update, you simply boot back into the old boot environment and you're back to where you started. If you want, if you want on a package basis, Pete will explain that.
So there's a couple of things there. So Jerry mentioned, I just have to go to the image property. So you have an image property. So when you make a change to system and add a package, and it doesn't require a reboot, it still takes a backup of your running system. And that's an image level property. Have a look at the mount page, PKG property, it tells you you'll take a backup. If it requires a reboot, it will create an alternative boot environment. You boot it to that, and then you run away, and you work with that. However, if you want to say, I have a package, I want to unlock it, I want to move Samba forwards, and I try it out, it doesn't work, you can then update it to the previous version and bring it back in line to what it was before. And you're done. But again, each of those operations will create you a backup boot environment. So if the actual package operation goes belly up, you've still got a boot environment you would then go to.
Will the backup would be similar to the Linux when you update the kernel, you have different levels in the boot? Is that how it works?
I've absolutely no idea what it does in the Linux world, but effectively, because we're well integrated with ZFS, it just takes a ZFS snapshot of what we've got running, and then you just promote that to the way you go. But it will be ADM command deals with that.
ZFS snapshots have very, very little overhead to them. It's simply to change delta, so it's not taking up a huge amount of space or so on. So you can see with BEADM, you can see all the boot environments you have there, and just revert back to one that you have confidence in. And again, that's important for maintenance update window. You've got 8 hours downtime. After 5 hours, you don't look like what you're seeing. Just revert back and then reschedule and start again.
I mean, he mentioned Samba. I mean, stick with that. And you said reboot the environment, but since it's not a kernel, but Samba's not a kernel thing, that's an application. So you could go back and not actually do a reboot. I just want to clarify. Okay, fine.
So what we have, we tag. One of the key things we tag each of the packages. In fact, we actually tag binaries with reboot required. So we actually know which binaries need to be rebooted. So for example, if you're changing Gen Unix, obviously that means you need to do a reboot. If you're changing a driver, it's safer to do a reboot. We are looking at how to do unloads and reloads with drivers without having to do a reboot, but there's intricacies with how do you deal with I/O that's in flight for disk HBA drivers. So there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be going on there. But IPS actually knows whether you need to reboot a system or not. So from a Samba one, because it's user land, you don't need to do a reload.
And that's part of the sort of improvements we're trying to make here, is get the intelligence into IPS so that you don't have to read patch readmes that say, oh well, stop the daemon, apply the patch, restart the daemon. Or my pet hate is those patches that say, only apply this to a quiesced system. Well, how quiesced does it need to be? If it blows up, it wasn't quiesced enough. I mean, that's the sort of stuff we're trying to get away from.
The dynamic kernel patching, or so that we're not going to require reboots going forward, is any of that coming from the K-Splice acquisition, or is that just an independent kind of Solaris resolution?
I would actually go to the November Tech Days and speak to some of the people who are coming along to that and ask that explicit question.
I'm just curious.
Would anybody do that?
Well, use K-Splice.
Yeah.
I'm going to defer that one to go to the November Tech Days and speak to some of the developers.
So, would anybody here do that?
What use K-Splice?
So obviously K-Splice is part of Oracle now, so it would be a bit silly if we weren't talking to them. But that's about as much as I can say. It doesn't force you to use it.
How easy is it to use? What's it like to use?
I guess.
Yeah. Do I need to go on a 3-day course and devote the rest of my life to understanding it?
I describe it
Or is
as...
it just a command that I can type that says, okay, I'm not going to tell you, I don't want to do anything complicated, just want you to update my system now with the latest whatever.
The simplest thing is simply to say package space update, and I'll take you to the latest. In fact, I'll take you to the latest it can take you to. There's constraints preventing it to bring to the very latest, it will bring you as far up as it can. Now, if things like security or golden images and that aren't an issue, then package update is sufficient. What we typically do is package update and then specify the actual version I want it to go to. So package update, entire at SU 12.4 or whatever it is, and then it'll tell you whether it can do that or not. And if it can, it will go off and do it. The sort of stuff that you typically want to do in an enterprise, maybe slightly more sophisticated than that, in that typically you might want to have a repository behind your firewall. So there's documents on how to set that up and then how to update it. It is pretty simple, but just there's a number of documents on the Oracle Technical Network that tell you how to do that. And then you would update from that. So, it's like anything else. There's a little bit of initial learning curve. Setting the publisher then to point as your internal repo rather than the default repo. But once you've done that, then away you go. Some of the more complex stuff of figuring out, is this bug fixed in a package? Which package is it fixed in? Which package delivers this file? All of that is possible with IPS, and it's all through the package command PKG. And man package is fairly condensed, but extremely powerful. So you can do anything with that.
So I think, as Jerry said, I'd actually say there's several different types of users. There's the end user, you're going to do a PKG update, and then there's the other user who's going to be saying, actually I want to change some features of my system, who's going to say PKG update to entire at a particular version, and then there's your developer who's going to be the one who makes packages and makes them available for people to use. IPS satisfies all of those requirements, so it's not only a packaging system, it's a development system, so you can actually develop and deploy your own packages, and it's a lot easier than doing the SVR4 work, to be honest. And again, we've actually got a very good developer guide which goes through each of those steps. And again, that's on the Oracle website, so again, I'd actually recommend reading that. It's very easy reading, I think.
So, the basic update's very, very simple. It's a little bit more, maybe not as intuitively obvious as to how to update independently of everything else, and having to unlock and then update and then remember to relock. But again, that's a sort of, it's just a learning curve. I remember starting out with Unix, and the find command used to bamboozle me as to why it would find things, but not tell you it had found things unless you put print on it. That was interesting.
Well, I would say I actually used your blog to create, my own parallel repository, and it was actually very straightforward and very good. But the three things that I had problems with sometimes around using IPS in the repository were the two instances where you would refresh, one both from package repo refresh, the other one when you need to use service ADM refresh to reread the configuration, and then disable, enable to restart the service. And then the third one being, I can't remember now. Because you have the read-only true and false. So those are the three different settings that really affect the results you get when you run queries against your package repository, also being able to publish and run some different commands. And in your blog, I actually followed through it verbatim when I was doing it, and I was actually getting some error messages and things like that, because I think maybe you had taken for granted that it maybe was only already in read-write mode, or something like that, or maybe you had just run refresh on something. So sometimes it's not clear to me when I need to run these things after I've interacted with my repository in a certain way, so that I can reread or recreate tables or things like that. So I get the result I expect from turning my repository.
I think that that's certainly something that Pete and I are working on with the IPS developers. There is probably there's still more usability improvements that need to be made there. As I said, they're a very clever bunch of guys. Sometimes IPS does remind me of a sort of academic exercise, and it needs a little bit of real world, normal human usability features. Things like that, where to work from a cache unless you tell it to refresh. There's a few gotchas like that, and again, that's partially what we're working on, and Pete and Albert White, who works in my team, documenting a lot of that stuff, and then working with the IPS guys to improve the usability. The other thing that IPS tends to be a little bit cryptic on is error messages. It says cannot update due to constraint, and that doesn't necessarily tell you what it felt that it didn't like, or else it tells you thousands of lines of what it didn't like. So again, we've got probably a little bit of usability work to do there, but that's something that's a work.
Well, and that's the thing that I found too. The only sources on the internet that actually have any usable information are either legacy, because it came from Open Solaris, Solaris Express, and a lot of those things aren't applicable anymore, or your blog. So
well, there is actually a lot of stuff. There's a lot of good stuff on OTN. There's a lot of stuff that Albert White, Lynn Foster, Pete have written there. So there is a lot of good stuff on OTN. I think again, one of the things. Unfortunately, I've been rather busy on Supercluster for last year, but one of the things I want to do is go back and collate some of those URLs and put them on the blog as a sort of an entry point, because there is actually a lot of information there. Moss isn't necessarily as searchable as we'd like it to be.
The thing is, you can always drop us a line anyway, and just say, I've had this issue, so that we can take it forward. from a repository management thing, Jerry said it, Albert White has written a how to manage your repository